Good morning, coffee moaners. Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are we all on this fair, very muggy Thursday? Is it muggy where you are? Let me just check out what the temperature is. It's incredibly close. But it's that sort of sudden closeness that makes you think the end of the world is coming. It says it's just 21 in London. It feels closer than that. Good morning, how are we all? What strange times we're living in, hey? How are you finding August so far? August the 1st. August the 1st. Can you believe it? Welcome if you're listening on podcast. What are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be asking the question. Are we on the precipice of lawlessness and racism in the UK? Or is it, and the reason I've put that in there, well, I haven't actually put it in there as a question, but it is a question. Is this lawlessness? Is this certainly not peaceful protesting, is it? Oh, hang on a minute. Feels a little bit like hate marching. Oh, no. We only say that peaceful protesters calling for ceasefires. They're hate marchers, of course. But seriously, what is happening? I want to know what you think is happening here. What does the hashtag enough is enough actually mean? It's trending on Twitter. And I think as with all these things, we drove over that cliff a few months ago thanks to bad policing. Give us more. Over which cliff? And in what way is it the policing? Is it the policing of all the protests and everything? Anyway, I mean, yes, the police have forever been questionable in so many areas, but also they're our only line of defense, aren't they? It's like having someone you don't know if you can rely on, but knowing that they're your only hope, to quote Princess Leia. You're our only hope. So we're going to be talking about whether it's lawlessness. Are we on the tipping point of lawlessness? Are we on the sort of precipice of big things? And this, of course, is partly to do with, the riots in Southport, but of course, the violence that we saw play out at Manchester Airport. So who's that? David Edwards. It's not racist. It's concerned people looking out for our kids. Okay, David Edwards, hold that thought because I really want to hear from people who feel this. So this is after the breakout of violence at Manchester Airport. We had Leeds a week or so ago. We had Manchester Airport, Southport. And violence was breaking out last night again in Manchester, also in Hartlepool and at Downing Street in protest. So we'll talk about that, but please hold that thought, Dave. We're gonna talk about Donald Trump. Wow, his opening gambit in his sort of, because everyone sort of thought Southend as well. Everyone sort of thought Trump was going to go, no, I don't want to do any kind of talk shows or chats or debates. I never thought he was going to back off. I don't know why people are trying to pretend he's a bit of a coward. He's so narcissistic, he's not going to back off. So we're going to talk about his astonishing assertion. We'll save it. If you haven't seen it, it's in the title. Trump says Kamala suddenly isn't black. She suddenly isn't black. Or she suddenly isn't Indian. She suddenly turns black. He's questioning whether she's black or whether she's Indian or whether she's both. Can you not be both? Anyway, we're going to talk about that in a moment. We are going to also talk about the Huw Edwards charges. As obviously he pled guilty yesterday. He's found guilty, but we're going to dig into a little bit the not the nature of the content, but the way in which he received them, the way in which the charge of creating this content what it amounts to in his case. And I got a few kind of lighter-hearted kind of clips and a nice, potentially nice story that came off the back of a horrible story last year. So, with all that in mind, let me just show you a couple of pictures. These are some images. This is Downing Street. Flares. I saw this story break yesterday afternoon. Flares fired at Downing Street. I mean, you've got to take these things seriously. Flares might not be a flare. How do we know it's a flare? You've got to be careful. There's the Winston Churchill sculpture. Always looks like he's on one leg, doesn't it? There, sort of like, it looks like he's doing that sort of funny trick. And here we have an image of a car on fire in Hartlepool. Now, I think the really important thing to do to remind us all here in terms of media Media. Steph Schultz, it's your birthday. Oh my God, let me make a note. Steph Schultz, it's your birthday. Steph Schultz. Oh, sweetie, how are you? You've been with us for yonks, and you're still relatively sane. I mean, that's quite something, isn't it? I'll sing you happy birthday at the end, sweetie. So yes, here are some images. But one of the things I wanted to say quite importantly is that, of course, when we see images of cars burning, it's always very dramatic. Of course it is. It is dramatic, and it shouldn't happen, and it's wrong. But don't forget, the press, the media, the photographers are always drawn to the most dramatic image. So even in that shot, what's making that shot dramatic, apart from the sort of chap on the bottom right, who clearly, I think, is just crossing the road in a very sort of peaceful manner, is the flare and the smoke and all that kind of stuff. But, sometimes look at an image and just remove the one big bit, because there's also over on the sort of, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you're sort of just next to my head above the police woman. There's a lady with her sunglasses on. She doesn't look too sort of bothered, does she? So do you know what I mean? So don't forget, it's not to say that these demonstrations didn't turn violent, that 100 arrests did happen. Oh, and Jackie Valino. Oh my God. You two, you share a birthday. Are you like twins? That's a really simplistic thing to say, isn't it? But yes, I'll sing you both happy birthday at the end. Oh, what a shame Nat isn't here today to do that. So here you go. Here are some images of what was going on last night. And so, yeah, Lee, there is so much of this happening everywhere that you don't hear about. For example, there was a very nasty protest where my mum lives and never heard about it. This is it. It's not getting reported everywhere. But I want to scroll back up to, was it Dave Edwards? I think Dave Edwards made a very simple point. I don't know if you've built upon it at all, Dave. It'd be really nice to have a bit more meat on the bones, as they say. I can't find it, but Dave Edwards said it's something about looking after our children or protecting our kids. Now, look, of course, protecting our kids insofar as the awful, because what's got lost in all of this is not got lost, how could it get lost? But, the awful stabbing in Southport of the killing of 3 children, critically injured, I think 6 other children, 2 adults at the Taylor Swift dance class. Just awful. And yes, protecting our children is I think we would all say, whether we were British, whether we were Rwandan, whether we were Palestinian, whether we were Israeli, maybe, I'm not sure about the Israeli government, we would all say that we want to make sure all children are protected. I think that's a given. I think that's an absolute given. So I'm just curious to know where the conflation of protecting children. Now, of course, we want to protect them against whatever made this youth, let's call him a youth because he's not a child, but this 17-year-old youth, whatever they did, and however, and for whatever reasons. I mean, I doubt we're ever going to get a kind of understandable reason, because, and I think this is a really important thing to say, because there's no rational way of explaining what's happened. Because in explaining it, you're not justifying it, but you're trying to understand it. And I have a horrible feeling that sometimes things happen that can't be understood. Because, and what ends up happening is so many people strive to put a meaning on it. And sometimes the meaning that gets put on these acts of awfulness, people sort of reach for the most obvious reason. I'm sort of trying to break down why there's been this conflation. Because this youth, the one thing we do know is, and we're not, he was, sorry, just one second. What is your, okay, I don't really understand that, but it seems pretty abusive, so I'm just going to get rid of that. This young boy, son of immigrants who'd escaped Rwanda, but brought up a Christian. So let's just start with the Islamic Muslim connection that was conflated between what occurred and then the violence that erupted in Southport. So where is the connection? Even if you don't think there is a connection, when people are saying enough is enough, what connection are people striving to make? I'm presuming this. Is it because he simply is a different skin color, and because of that, this speaks to an absolutely underlying, immediate racist connecting thought. I hate to say it, I think it does. I think it does. And I think lots of people would want to quickly say, it's not about that, it's not about that. Well, I think it is in Southport. A totally fake connection was made, immediately running for the immediate kind of group of people that one could run at and blame. And this is where I find a deep sort of contradiction and irony. On the one hand, condemning the awfulness, as we all do, the awfulness of what happened to these poor kids and the injured kids and their families and everything, and then somehow justifying, though the police prevented any violence actually happening, a sort of the start of violence that could lead to anything awful, could lead to death, could lead to injury, could lead to, but attacking people who weren't involved in nor connected to something else. And this is, for me, the most petrifying aspect of all of this. We can have conversations about migration. We can have conversations about asylum seekers. We can have conversations about how actually there are issues around assimilating into one culture, the value systems and attitudes of other cultures when going through the process of integration. We can talk about north-south economic divide. We can talk about, mental health provision. Because I'd have thought that what has happened with this boy is going to be a failure of a collapse of his mental health, a collapse of his, I guess, social status or whatever. And so that speaks to, that's not excusing it, but that speaks to something else if we want to look. So why don't we look to that? Oh, we don't look to that because it's much more complicated. No one seems to be interested in the more nuanced, complicated questions that need to be asked or the more complicated reasons that might be behind this. Everyone wants, and this is when countries and racism spins into something quite dangerous, because all people don't want the truth, they just want a target. People don't want the truth, they just want a target. And I think what's worrying about the hashtag, like enough is enough, that could almost be quite an understandable sort of statement for people who feel that they've got no hope and they feel that they've got no prospects, or they feel that they've been forgotten or they're not heard. But it's being used now, and it's attached to countless threads and tweets and social media posts and sharing of false information that's essentially racist and is anti-Black, anti-Muslim, etc. And there's this really curious connection happening online. I don't know if anyone else has looked into it. I have this morning, between clearly far-right aggravating kind of accounts, and lots of them using the Star of David and the Israeli, or lots of, I guess, maybe Zionist bots types. There's a conflation and there's a connection. And I think lots of people prior to the Palestinian Gaza thing didn't realize that you can be Israeli and Jewish, and you can be the extreme right and racist. It's incredibly complicated, but people aren't interested. And there were big phone in on Nick Ferrari this morning. And to be fair, Nick Ferrari was allowing quite a nuanced conversation to kind of develop. And a lot of people were phoning in and just saying it's a lack of education. It's our education. It's not even people's fault that they're not educated. It's the education system. Every single country, ours, America's, is built on immigration and countless different people coming together. We are all fascinated by shows like Who Do You Think You Are? And we all look kind of dewy-eyed and kind of like, oh, wow, have I got a connection to someone it all seems so quaint and kind of nostalgic and understandable and explainable. But we don't want to hear that in the modern times. We don't want to hear that today, that actually, for most economies in the world to function, you have to have people moving about the world and changing jobs, and you have to have workflow. But people aren't interested in that. Let's have a look at some of what you're saying. Christos, hi Christos. There's a lot more anger in the world post-pandemic. The whole failing of the system on the people has caused the unfathomable raise of levels of anger and subsequently similar behaviors. Yeah, totally agree. Mark, why didn't the police approach the rioters last week with the same vigor? They ran away. Why? They were seemingly there to protect a child. Protesters were there because of the death of kids. Why did the rioters last week? Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's there are huge kind of contradictions and inconsistencies, not even contradictions, inconsistencies in the way in which law and order is being applied. Who it feels like who's protecting who. Get that. There's one bloody fly above our head. Steph Schultz, they wait for something to happen to jump on and use it. Thug hate mentality born out of racism, which in itself I don't understand. You see, because that's why I don't understand. Dave, are you still here? I really want to sort of just get to the bottom of what this, because we want to protect our children thing is. Because I think everyone wants to protect their children. That's a given. It's not about not protecting our children. It's not about by saying this isn't the right way to go about it. Unless you're going on the streets hurling bricks and attacking the police and sabotaging mosques, unless you're doing that, you're not wanting to protect your kids. I don't quite get the connection. So today, Keir Starmer is meeting with the police heads. He's leading with police leaders. There's protests in London, Hartlepool, even outside a Holiday Inn in Manchester last night. Protesters were turning up at a hostel or a hotel or a Holiday Inn where asylum seekers or immigrants migrants are kind of being housed as their cases are kind of processed. Rhys Roberts, and especially superpowered countries like the UK and the US, that is built on the back of ethnic minorities who, despite erroneous treatment, nonetheless still build lives and legacy. Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult to get people to understand that without the many different colors and cultures that these incredibly affluent countries have essentially exploited and then taken in and then housed and then looked after, I think there's still this aspect of, for those who feel they are proudly white and British, everyone has been given a favor or done a favor. Whereas actually, you could argue we've all been done a favor by everyone else at half the price and twice the stress. Bonnie Delaney, evolutionary psychology discusses invasion, tolerance, tribalism. It's good to be aware of how we operate as a collective. Sally A, but the sex assaults, the knife crime has skyrocketed. That's why we have to protect it. It's not safe anymore. All of those things are true. I think this is, and I'm seeing it coming through in a couple of comments here. I agree with you, but Sally A, because I've seen you comment quite a few times. So Sally A, are you saying that you feel that because the sex assaults and knife crime have skyrocketed, and that's why we have to protect it's not safe? And I'm not suggesting you are, but is the connection that is connected to the number of people from abroad that we've got in the country? Is that what that's about? Or because when we look at things like when you think about things like toxic masculinity, assaults against women, this isn't all happening by, most of these kind of crimes, certainly sexual assault crimes, are by people who are known to the people that these happen to. Statistically, I'm not a big fan. I know, me too. The statistics, I don't think necessarily do speak to the truth. Our children talk about this living in London all the time. The statistics and our kids' friends say whatever the statistics say, and they were horrendous when we were discussing them last week. Crime against women, reported versus unreported. And then there isn't even the category of crime that happens that is neither reported nor unreported, because people don't even necessarily want to see it as a crime. That's the most dangerous part of all of it, I think. I think what then happens is, who do we attack? Or do we attack anyone? Who do we point the finger at? It shows to be that way. So Sally, who do you feel is responsible for this increase? I'm just diving in because I know that you said, because I think, I'll tell you what I think happens. I'll read yours out in a minute, Francesca. We feel, I think what happens as humans is we all had a strong feeling about Southport. And then it's like, I remember a counsellor or a therapist once saying, anger is an emotion to feel, but it's what you do with it. It's what you do with it. And I just think it's misguided and troubling if we seek to castigate an entire group of people for something that they've had no direct, literal, physical involvement with. Because this is something that I was worried was going to play out. If they hadn't, because here's what could have happened in Southport. I mean, some are saying it did. Some are saying a Muslim youth pulled a knife. All these say, and the other thing that happened yesterday was when, can I just say, the police identified it as the English Defence League, not us. It was the police saying they believe the EDL is involved. Now, a lot of people are wanting to kind of say all over the social media, they said it under this live yesterday, it doesn't exist. It's spurious. It's made up. It's not a thing. It might not have a website. It might not have a sort of registered address or anything like that, but it's not a made up thing. You know, this is something that the police are identifying. But what could have happened in Southport was hostilities towards a group of Muslims at the mosque. Some of the people at the mosque in self-defense fight back. That then becomes characterized as proof for those attacking them that they need to attack them. Do you see what I mean? Do you see how these things just kind of mushroom? Grace Ann Martin, not all protesters are thugs. Really good point. And I hope you kind of felt that's kind of what I was saying with this image here. I mean, there were 100 arrests yesterday, but we have to, and again, at so many of the ceasefire, pro-Palestinian, or end of the occupation marches, there were arrests, and that's not to say that those arrests weren't justified, but it doesn't mean that the whole march was dismissible. And I think by the same standard, not all protesters are thugs. We have to remember what we are standing up for. Too much control is in the hands of people who can't even tell you what a man or a woman is. Too much power to the few. And I think, Grace Ann Martin, you do speak to feelings and truths and a disenfranchisement or an inability to be heard. And I do think that is an issue. And I think this is the weird part of, say, even a hashtag like enough is enough. I could even, like change. One could almost get on board with enough is enough if it was related to government policy, the way in which they don't hear the bureaucratic language. But it's when it's being used as a justification to attack anyone, that's when it becomes troublesome and dangerous. And I'm not even trying to pick my way through this. For me, this feels quite logical and tangible to be able to talk about these things. You can have entire sectors of the British, principally white population, if you like, indigenous insofar as who is indigenous. Strictly speaking, even this 17-year-old youth was born in this country. So what are we talking about now? Are we talking about the children of migrants too? Is that where we're worried? I think you can speak to the truth of, say, and we've talked about it here before. I think working class, white, disenfranchised boys, be mindful, because every group of people needs to be heard. Here we go. MeToo gives us a nice sort of bit of clarity around this. Enough is enough started about the cost of living policies. I kind of understand that, but it's been hijacked by the far right. Lee Durrant, enough is enough is adding fuel to the fire. Laura S, I really do hope the government makes some massive changes. It needs to happen now. And I really want, I'm not wanting people to kind of explain or justify. I don't want an argument. I just think it's interesting to understand, because unless people feel heard, and I think Dave, who went up earlier, I'm not necessarily saying that's what you're saying, Sally, but who has the feeling that most of the problems that we're going through as a country are because of immigration? And if so, don't be afraid to say yes. I'm not going to shoot you down, but just use nice language. Don't use angry language, and just sort of say why you think that is. Because, for example, I think you'd have to be moronic to say that there is not something called a culture clash. That assimilating, different value systems or ways of living. There are many kind of values that we have. It's a Western country around women and gender politics that certain people coming from other countries wouldn't share. And I think it's all right to say that. And in saying that doesn't mean you're saying, you're being racist. Equally, you're acknowledging the truth of the situation, and it's about them finding a way to kind of bridge the two. Gloria Chesson, we can't cope with the influx. And does it feel like an influx? Do you have that feeling that it's an influx? In your day-to-day life, most of the problems we have, says Amy Fenton, are because of austerity from the last government due to a lack of investment in communities. And many people feel that governments that allow, so a lack of, and what happens in a lack of austerity? I'm not saying we're in a Weimar Republic German hinterland of the 1930s before, what kicked off. But the thing that led to Hitler's popularity was a sense and a feeling amongst the population that they couldn't live their best lives. They didn't have what they wanted. It was austerity. Germany after World War I struggled with massive austerity, and this drove people to find an excuse and a reason for why they weren't living their best lives. And Hitler, unfortunately, appealed to all the worst characteristics in people to say, blame them. It's their fault, i.e. Jewish people and others. I mean, if we can't see the parallels there, so it's about not going for a knee-jerk reaction. I think it's the difference between someone wanting just revenge against someone or anyone, or actually turning. Now, where this does become problematic, and I'd love to know what you all think about this, is when politicians you don't feel like they're speaking your language. We've said this so many times about Labour and Conservatives. When you feel that the politicians aren't speaking your language, people become so frustrated that it does spill out and it does bleed out. And I think in that sense, you could argue, that that's the same thing behind the eco-activists. Racism is one of the excuses, says Amy Fenton. Donny Harvey, fundamentally, I'm more concerned a 70-year-old has taken a taxi from home to the scene to murder children. What is going on to make a child so young to be named to do that? Donny, I agree. I mean, we're going to be looking at, who's going to look at this from every interdepartmental perspective of economics, social care, education, gender, religion, but clearly Christian in this instance. What has gone wrong? Possibly drugs? I don't know. I mean, my first thought was when you hear a youth has gone and done something so fucking ridiculous, you think, is it a psychotic episode? Is it some kind of... Gabrielle, if we had politicians who represented all communities, maybe we wouldn't have so many problems. Now, here, I'm going to say something that's really odd, just quickly. Nadia always dreads it when I say this. I have always screamed for proportional representation. Now, many people who know their German history would argue, it was proportional representation that allowed Adolf Hitler's party to gain a foothold. There is that possibility. But I do wonder and I do fear that unless proportional representation comes in, so many people's voices are unheard. That this is what happens. I think it's telling that this is kicking off. Let's look at it. Within the first, 3 weeks of a Labour government? Is there a fear or a feeling amongst the protesters and those who have hijacked the enough is enough kind of moniker? Are they saying these are a bunch of liberal softies? Reese. Because often a lot of answers to the issues we face as a country lie inward. But because the external is so appealing as the incoming threat, the reasoning always gets shifted to outsider reasons. As plain and simple as that. It's like we've got internal issues. It's like having our own problems with ourselves being white, let's say. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll blame someone else for being black. Which is kind of almost neatly taking us towards the next story. But I just want to read a few more of your comments because this is interesting. And I don't think we ever... And again, do check out LBC's... Nick Ferrari's show this morning was really interesting. He was allowing people to talk and he wasn't allowing just one side to talk. But it was interesting to hear the frustrations, the aggravations, but also the reasoning behind this happening and how there are certain red lines. There are certain red lines. You don't just take on racist thoughts. You don't just become racist. Do you know what I mean? Let's have a look. Francisco, sorry, Bastos. I'm also from a colonizer country, Portugal. I find it extremely hypocritical of us now to think that we can't deal with it. Sorry if I sound too extreme. Interesting. Epsington, some people may feel that they are not free to criticize other races or religions as they would be accused of being racist. This must lead to frustration when it is only criticism, not hate. Well, maybe what you're speaking to there is the thing that I'm saying, which is it's about, and I think that is a governmental, social issue that needs to be resolved, where we encourage a sort of, integration. We encourage integration without judgment. And I think the reason integration doesn't happen is, I know a lot of people say, that's because they create just single religion schools and they keep to themselves and da-da-da-da-da. But how much of that is because they don't feel safe or they feel threatened? Catherine Cronin, Ireland have taken far more people than the UK proportionally, but the cost of living is crazy and a trigger for protest and hate. I mean, I've always said it as well. You do also have to, however unpalatable it is, you have to talk about having some kind of cap or limit on migration, global migration. But I think this is, and again, without wishing to sound like a politician, this is a global problem. And I think the irony is we've been sold a pup that by, agreeing to Brexit and getting out of Europe, we would be able to take control of our borders. When in fact, I think it's beginning to look like it was the case that by cooperating with Europe, being part of Europe, the burden was shared. And I think the only way in the future of the planet with eco change and everything, we can't just pretend ecological disaster isn't happening when it is happening. These changes will result in mass migration. And we have to share the burden of this. It is the consequence of it, of the way everyone has lived. It's that thing, I always remember years ago when people would say things, about 10 years ago, people would go, well, China just needs to stop using fucking petrol cars and or so much oil. And you feel like, or India, no, it was about India. And you'd be like, well, to be fair to India, they could argue, well, hang on a minute, we've only just got ourselves on our feet post being a puppet, part of the British Empire. Are we not allowed our moment in the sun? You've used as much bloody oil and petrol as you've wanted to. Why can't we? Anyway, it's I just think, as I look at these images, you sort of think, oh my God. And I'm pleased you said that. I forget who it was who said that. Was it Gloria, who said, not all of these protesters, again, not all of these protesters are violent. You're absolutely right. It's like I often say that thing of, not everyone who voted for Brexit was a racist, but if you were a racist, you're probably going to vote for Brexit. And that's an important distinction because I heard again on the radio today, some people have voted for Brexit because they were looking at things in a half full way. They thought this would be better for Britain, better for our multicultural country, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas there were those who just wanted to shut us off and isolate us from all other influences. It can't happen. Though there is an argument it's going to happen even more. On that note, let's move on. My God, we've talked for half an hour about that. Thanks, guys, for all of your contributions. Thank you for, again, and also expressing opinions that aren't necessarily the group's shared feelings, but just to get a sense and to feel heard and to say it is really important. Okay, let's talk about Donald Trump. I'm going to plop up this clip here, which is Donald Trump was speaking at, let me just get rid of these stories. So Keir Starmer is talking to police today about this, so we're going to hear more about that. So Donald Trump was talking at a conference of black journalists. Let me get the full name of the group, because the National Association of Black Journalists. He was invited to talk. He did talk. And his opening gambit, in a sense, in the sort of American election is well, let me play it and see what you think.
I have answered the question. I have been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln. That's my answer.
Better than President Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act. Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you?
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black.
As a...
Just pause for a second. She happened to turn black. What do we... Okay, let's see what the White House's response was.
Of color, as a black woman who is in this position that is standing before you at this podium behind this lectern, what he just said, what you just read out to me, is repulsive. It's insulting.
You said police would get immunity from prosecution if you win. Why should someone like that officer have immunity in your...
They move on to talk about an officer, the police officer who killed Sonia Massey. This is the story we talked about last week.
Opinion.
Immunity?
Immunity.
I don't know the exact case, but I saw something, and it didn't look good to me. It didn't look good to me. Sometimes very bad decisions are made. They're not made from an evil standpoint, but they're made from the standpoint of they made a mistake. I will tell you that coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs. She failed her law exam. She didn't pass her law exam, so maybe she wouldn't pass the cognitive test. And maybe she passed it.
She did pass it.
There's a man over here. I think he must work.
Mr. President,
the Democrat Party is.
I mean, this is the kind of language that makes everyone think the problem lies elsewhere. So essentially, the big story here is that he said he didn't know Kamala Harris turned black. She was Indian when he knew her, and then she turned black. He then talks about black jobs, and the moderator says very pointedly, well, what is a black job? What is a black job exactly? And he says a job that anyone can. I mean, I'll keep playing it because it is quite staggering. We rarely see this content over here.
That has the problem. I think they're radical on abortion because they're allowing abortion in the 9th month. They're allowing the death. They're allowing the death of a baby after the baby is born, based on the governor of Virginia. Based on the governor of Virginia, they're allowing the death of the baby.
Is illegal. Senator J.D. Vance is your running mate. He's had a lot of controversy lately, and I want to read you a few things that he has said in the past. He said the Democrats running the country are a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices they've made. Did you know that he had these views about people who do not have children before you picked him to be your running mate, and do you agree with him?
No, I know this. He is very family-oriented.
Senator J.D. Vance has suggested that someone who has children should have more votes than a person who does not have children. I just want to be clear here. Is that the position of your campaign?
Well, no, but it's not something I have ever heard before.
Why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. If I came onto a stage like this and I got treated so rudely as this woman treated me.
Oh, my goodness.
Very rude. That was that wasn't a question.
I think we have to leave it there by the Trump team.
All right.
So leave it. That is the last word. Thank you so much, Mr. Trump, for coming today and joining us.
This afternoon, Donald Trump spoke at the annual meeting of the National Association of Black Journalists. And it was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect. And let me just say, the American people deserve better. The American people deserve better.
Someone just said it just there. I just trying to find who is it who's saying she's not. Audrey Sargent. Kamala is not black. Kamala is not black. Can you not be black and Indian? Can you not? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it's about switching allegiance. We're not talking about. I think only someone who's white. No, I'm not saying this of you, but I'm saying it of Trump. Can only someone who's white think in these terms that somehow you can turn one thing or turn the other and not actually be both? And if you're, and one of the news stations was trying to use a clip biracial. Thank you, Christine. Nadia's Anglo-Arab, half Arabic, half English. I mean, apparently I've got 7% in Far East when I did my DNA. My grandmother was like, well, I don't know where that's come from. Maybe that was Derek when he went to Indonesia. I was like, who the fuck's Derek? You know what I mean? It's Audrey Sargent. Disagree. Explain why. Please explain. I know it's easy to kind of just say agree, disagree, but honestly, Audrey, just interested to know: can she not be biracial? Can she not be Indian and her father's Jamaican? Is she not sort of there by what would she be? Indio? Can you be Afro-Caribbean Indian? I guess I don't think it's about shifting identity, and I don't think it's about not being one or the other. But again, one of the broadcasters, thank you, Reese. People of mixed heritage who come from dual races identify themselves how they see fit. And I would have thought, Reese, clarify if I'm wrong. I've known obviously lots of people of mixed ethnicity in different circumstances and around different groups of people. So, for example, when Nadia is talking to someone who's from Palestine or Jordan, she talks much more about herself as Arab because she's connecting with them on that. And if she's talking to someone from Basildon who's white, she talks a little bit more about maybe her mum being from Surrey. So much has been made of a clip where Kamala Harris appears on a cookery show. with an Indian cook, and the Indian cook says, "You identify as Indian, don't you? You're Indian patronage or descent," and she goes, "Yes." Now she's not going to imagine if she said, "Yes, I am, but actually I'm also black too." That would be kind of odd conversationally. It would be odd, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be odd to kind of to clarify? We are arguing about the minutiae instead of seeing that Kamala is trying to get the black vote. But Audrey, okay, do you not think that part of it, or what Trump's trying to do here, is a little bit like when he was querying Obama? Was it him who was querying Obama's birth certificate, where he was born, whether he could even run for presidency? I mean, I think what's difficult for Trump to kind of accept is that she does, it's blunt language to use this, but she kind of, unfortunately for him, does inadvertently and through no fault or act of her own, tick 3 boxes: black, Indian or Asian, and woman. I mean, I think Tamika Patterson sums it up. She has the black vote. I think, I think what's also tricky here is the suggestion that she's kind of somehow been underhand. I don't think that's the case. But anyway, we can certainly feel and see. But thank you, Audrey. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I mean, you can see how this election is going to go, can't you? Me too. Interesting point in response to you, Audrey, as well. All politicians play to various communities. They represent all community interests. Yeah, I mean, I guess like a female politician in a female group is going to talk more about being a woman or her female experiences to that group. You feel she's being underhand. Okay, Audrey, well, it's clear. It's clear what you feel. Mr. Jason 916, Trump just hates her. And he's looking for every which way to get her, I think. But it's going to be intriguing. Let's not forget that, Trump does also have many black voters too. So, but someone made a point earlier. This is how he actually talked about Kamala, at a conference for black female journalists. And you sort of think, my God, if this is how he's talking in front of them, is this him being careful? Or is he always unedited? Is he always unsort of varnished? Huw Edwards, let's move on to Huw Edwards. And then I've got a couple of funny clips for you. Huw Edwards, obviously, we said yesterday, it happened yesterday, he pleaded guilty. I just wanted to share with you this detail here. Oh, by the way, I always thought, just going back to Trump for a moment, I always thought Trump was white, but then he suddenly turned orange. Sorry, I just couldn't resist that, couldn't resist it. Just removing that. So, oh God almighty, this must be the longest lawn in the world. So Huw Edwards was found guilty. Let's have a look what we've got here. 62-year-old, he committed 3 offences. He admitted having 41 indecent child photographs on WhatsApp. I think questions here for the BBC. They said they were aware he'd been arrested, but I'm not entirely sure how that plays with them keeping him on the payroll. So I think there's a lot of kind of upset and contention around that. He'd been involved in an online chat with an adult man on WhatsApp between December 2020 and August 2021. This person sent him, Huw Edwards, 377 sexual images, of which 41 fell into these 3 categories of indecent. So the bulk of these were sent during this 2-month period. This was a 2-month period. Apparently, there was no evidence of Mr. Huw Edwards searching for these photographs. He received them. And on February 2nd, 2021, the guy who sent these to Huw Edwards asked whether he was sending too young, were the images too young, and in response to which Mr. Huw Edwards said, "Do not send any underage images." So the images that he did have, that he did receive, were of children between the ages of 13 and 15. And one of the other films, I think it was a film or an image, featured a child younger than 12. Now, I think much was being made of the fact that the context of him receiving these, he didn't actively go out and search for them, and he actively asked them not to be illegal. I just want to ask a question. And it's a kind of question that I'm just curious to know what you think. Yeah, BBC hiding again. I mean, I think the BBC has been called up to again, a bit like the police leaders, up to the government, quite rightly so. What the hell did you know? When did you know this? If you knew he was arrested, why was he still on the payroll, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was going to say, right, thank you, Edward Bevington, you said it for me. Where is the comment? Where's it gone? That will go some way, I think you said, to alleviating or reducing his potential sentencing. Does that in any way shift the perspective on him at all. The fact that, okay, you know, because an important thing that was being said again last night by an expert in child abuse, etc., is everyone talks about the act of disseminating, sending, receiving imagery and all this kind of stuff. But no one remembers that with every image, there are a multitude of people and stories and emotions and tragedies that have occurred. But does the nature or the way in which these images came to him, the fact that, as I understand it, I don't think he even went searching for something like this on his own computers. They did a sort of interrogation of everything. Does that in any way moderate anything in anyone's mind about him? He kept opening them, apparently. And Illing, there you go. So you can be charged if someone else sends you images and you open them. Got to be careful. I mean, you know, it will have been that he'd have been sent them not sort of randomly, but sent them within a discussion and a dialogue. So if someone sends you, let's have a look, Steph Schultz, underage images, you can be prosecuted. Is it the volume of images and not blocking? Is there more involved? It's a good question, because then it's like, well, how do you know, what if someone does? What do you do? There were over 400 images, 40 were child images. There you go. It's even more strategic so as not to leave a trail, says Bonnie Delaney. Oh, okay. Is that what you see in it? Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Again, it's terrible, isn't it? Trusting. If I was sent one image, I would admit, well, and there you go. So you're sent an image and you're told that they are underage. Rather than just saying, don't send me anymore, make sure they're not this, you report it, right? But then I guess, could that speak to why he got involved in the whole kind of thing of spending money trying to prevent people from kind of, you know, this person should block and report Michelle Hofstein. There we go. Well, there we go. Okay, finally, I just want to say happy birthday to Steph Schultz before playing you two funny clips. Steph Schultz, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Steph Schultz. Happy birthday to you. I hope you have a lovely day, sweetie. Leo? Are you Leo? You are Leo, yes. And Jackie Valino, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jackie. Happy birthday to you. Two long standers there. Big happy birthdays from everyone else in the room. And I just want to show you this clip. The gentleman involved was fine. It's a kind of pranky kind of post. It made me chuckle this morning. And it could have been me. This could be me. This could so be me. But just check this out. Now, listen to her response. He's headbutted his own car, but listen to this.
What did you do? What happened?
Listen. This is kind of what Nadia would say to me.
Man, you dented the fuck out of your truck. Oh.
You've dented the fuck out of your truck. Thanks. And just finally, I think if you want to, let's have a snapshot of how we could be led by Trump. The free world could be led by Trump. This is the man who could well be in power. We've all seen it before, but it popped up on my feed again today. It made me laugh in a sort of, oh my Christ sort of way. But here we go, playing this for you all too and signing out after it.
Has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden.
Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead.
The United States launched a targeted operation against that compound.
They did a lot of shooting, and they did a lot of blasting, even not going through the front door. You know, you think you go through the door. If you're a normal person, you say, knock, knock, may I come in?
After a firefight, they killed Osama bin Laden and took custody of his body.
He died like a dog.
But his death does not mark the end of our effort.
A beautiful dog, a talented dog.
We give thanks for the men who carried out this operation.
And I don't get any credit for this, but that's okay. I never do. But here we are.
May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
And I'm writing a book. I think I wrote 12 books. All did very well.
Bye, guys. Have a lovely day. See you later. Mallorca 5 is landing.